All right, so how the hell do you make time for everything? This is the question that has been plaguing philosophers and productivity bros since the dawn of time. And in this video, I would like to present to you one way to answer that question, which is this spreadsheet. It's called 168 hours because there are 168 hours in every week. And the whole idea behind this spreadsheet is that you put in how many minutes or hours you spend doing like the basic stuff that we all have to do in life. And the spreadsheet will automatically calculate of your 168 hours in each week, how many hours are you spending on sleep, on work, on food, on chores, on childcare, whatever the thing is that you might want to do. If you would like to download the spreadsheet, it's free. There is a link down below. But basically in this video, using the spreadsheet and also using my own experience in this, actually try and sincerely answer the question of like, how do we actually make time for everything? Now we're broadly gonna split this video up into two parts. In the first part, I'm gonna go through the data from the American Time Use Survey, which is, I believe, the world's largest data set of real data around how the average person, or rather the average American, spends their time. And we're gonna be filling out a spreadsheet based on that. And then we'll have a sense of how does the statistically average person spend their time and how do they make time for everything? And then in the second half of the video, I'm gonna be sharing my own tips on how I managed to make time for certain things. If you're not familiar with my story, I started a business while I was in medical school at Cambridge University, and then I grew my YouTube channel to 1 million subscribers while I was working full-time as a doctor in the UK. And so if you are interested in exactly how that juggling act happened, then again, I will show you exactly what the deal was. And hopefully by the end of the video, you will realize that it's not as impressive as it sounds based on the spreadsheet. All right, so let's start by filling out the spreadsheet using rough average data that I asked ChatGPT and Claude to do some research on and collate with like Nielsen data, the American Time Use Survey data, some other survey about how Americans spend their time, and also cross-reference it with like global average data on like how people spend their time. And so roughly, these are the kind of numbers that we get. So in the spreadsheet, you can see we've got these graphs, and these graphs are gonna update as we insert new data into it. So I aim to sleep for around how many hours per night? Let's say 8. Actually, according to the American Time Use Survey, it's about 8.7 on average for Americans, but like we're just gonna go with 8 to keep the numbers like nice and simple. And so we can see that the spreadsheet has calculated that this means I spend 56 hours per week sleeping. And then let's say you wanna wind down 30 minutes before sleeping. You spend 3.5 hours per week winding down. In total, that means I spend 59.5 hours per week on sleep-related things, which leaves 108.5 hours per week for everything else. And of course, this is a video about how to make time for everything. So, this is a good start. We are spending about 35% of our lives doing sleep-related things. Next up, there is the category of work. So let's say you work for around 8 hours per day, 5 days per week. Let's say your lunch break is 30 minutes, which is the average. Let's say your commute is 30 minutes each way, which again is the average. Let's say you spend 45 minutes a day getting ready for work, and let's say you spend 15 minutes per day getting changed after work at the end of the workday. This means you spend 52.5 hours per week working, which leaves 56 hours a week for everything else. So we can see that our little graph is updated such that sleep is now 35.4% of our life, work is about 31.3% of our life, and so far we've got a third of our life left. So this is a pretty accurate. We generally spend about a third of our lives sleeping and around a third of our lives working, and so we have another 8-ish hours a day, i.e. another third of our lives for like literally everything else. But now the plot thickens. Let's try food. Now I'm gonna fill these out based on averages that I got off the internet. So apparently the average person spends 15 minutes eating breakfast and 10 minutes preparing or cooking or ordering it. The average person spends 25 minutes eating lunch on a non-work day and another 20 minutes-ish, like cooking and cleaning and stuff for the lunch. And the average person apparently spends 30 minutes eating dinner and around 35 minutes preparing, cooking, and ordering it. If you add all these numbers together, that means we spend 12 hours per week on cooking plus or minus eating the food. And obviously, if you download the spreadsheet, you can make these numbers change depending on what your situation is. Let's say I do the groceries 1 time per week, and each grocery session takes 60 minutes, including travel, loading, unloading, like all the stuff. Let's say I've got to clean the house maybe twice a week and it takes 45 minutes. Let's say I do laundry twice a week and it takes 30 minutes. And then I do miscellaneous chores another 3 hours per week. This means we are spending 6.5 hours per week on chores, which is just under an hour a day. This is actually a little bit of an underestimate. And obviously this varies massively depending on if you have kids. Then we've got this little childcare component. So I'm actually gonna keep this at 0 for now. And then we're gonna see how childcare actually influences things further down the line. We're gonna come back to the childcare thing. The average American spends around 2.5 hours per week doing like fitness and exercise related things. Obviously, I would hope you are exercising more than that so you can update your numbers and see what it's like for you. The average American, according to the American Time Use Survey, spends 19 hours a week watching TV shows and movies and streaming, and I think YouTube videos are included in this. That is absolutely mental. 19 hours a week, wow. Let's say you're gonna spend 3.5 hours a week on social media apps. This is half an hour a day. This is a massive, massive underestimate. If you look at the data for 18 to 24-year-olds, they spend 5.1 hours per day on social media apps on their phones. That's staggering. That's like a whole full-time job. being on social media on your phone. Let's say you spend 0 hours reading, 1 hour gaming, and let's say you spend, I don't know, I'm gonna say 6 hours on other entertainment stuff. So you're spending 29.5 hours per week on entertainment, which leaves 4 hours per week for literally everything else. So let's say you spend 3 hours on quality family and partner time, and maybe 1 extra hour on socializing time. Now, in this world, we have already used up our allocation of 168 hours, and we don't even have kids. We don't have any childcare time that's put into this. But even just doing this basic stuff, which is what the average American does without kids, already the 168 hours have already been used. That's pretty staggering. This is the unfortunate truth of life in the modern world, life in modernity, which is that it's really, really hard to make time for everything. Even just, if you just look at what the average person does with their time. The average person is not starting a business or doing side hustles or spending loads of time on hobbies. Even just having like a vague sense of what like an average person does, already, the 168 hours in the week are literally used up, and so there's no time for anything else. And if you are enjoying the video so far, then you will absolutely love to check out this video's sponsor, which is Brilliant. Brilliant is a beautiful interactive learning app that helps you build knowledge in maths and science, programming, data, and even in AI. And you learn all these skills through active problem solving rather than just passively watching stuff. It's designed to make learning feel like a game that you want to keep playing, which is honestly such a refreshing change from the usual lecture style kind of content out there, including the stuff that I have on my YouTube channel, admittedly. Now, one thing I've been absolutely loving recently is their courses on data analysis, where they show you how to parse and visualize massive data sets in a really intuitive way so that you can actually draw useful insights rather than just drowning in numbers. At the moment, my team and I are building various different apps, and a crucial part of that has been figuring out how to deal with all of the data we are ingesting with the apps so that we can work out what steps to take next. And so having a strong grasp of data analysis has been really important. They've also got fantastic courses on AI. So if you're interested in learning kind of a first principles based approach to how large language models like ChatGPT and stuff actually work, then you'll get a lot of value out of Brilliant's interactive courses on AI. If you would like to give Brilliant a try, you can head over to brilliant.org/AliAbdaal to start your 30-day free trial. And if you do decide to go for the premium subscription, you can get 20% off the annual premium subscription as well. So thank you so much, Brilliant, for sponsoring the video, and let's get back to it. Now, if we add childcare into this, let's say it's on average 2 hours a day of like active childcare. Obviously, this varies massively depending on how old the kids are and like all the stuff, but these seem to be like roughly average numbers. And then on top of that, each week you spend, let's say, another 2 hours on admin and logistics related to the kids, and let's say another 2 hours on miscellaneous child-themed stuff. Obviously, feel free to download the spreadsheet and change it for yourself if you do have the childcare situation. But we can see that now childcare takes at least 18 hours a week, and we are overdrawn. We have negative 18 hours free for like all the things. So in the spreadsheet, we've got this view that shows how you are spending your 168 hours a week at the moment, but then we also have an ideal week, which is how would you ideally like to spend your 168 hours. And once you put in all the stuff for the ideal week, it will calculate like the difference between your ideal week and your current week. And so hopefully that'll give you a little bit of a sense of like where are the tweaks you can make to your time. Let's say you don't have kids, we'll get rid of all the childcare stuff. And let's say you're actually not watching any TV at all, but you are doing the average 18 to 24 thing, and you are spending 5.1 hours a day on social media. So 5.1 times 7 is 35.7. So let's say you're spending 35.7 hours a week on social media apps. You can look at your own screen time and you can see how that number vibes with you. Again, we are overdrawn. That's negative 13 hours left in the week. So if you're doing anything like what the average person does, there are physically not enough hours in the week. This is, I think, a liberating insight. I speak to a lot of people who want to make time for all the stuff and are finding it really hard. If you are finding it really hard to make time to learn the guitar or learn piano or like learn that language or like take dating seriously or like start a business or build a YouTube channel or post on LinkedIn or write a book, like the stuff that people want to do on the side that they come to me about, it's really, really, really hard to make time to do this stuff. Because, as we can see, based on the 168 hours that we have, a third of our life is spent sleeping, a third of our life is spent working. In those other 8 hours, you've got to do the chores, the food, you've got to cook the food, you've got to prepare the food, you've got to buy the food. In those extra 8 hours, you've got to make time for fitness because you want to have a healthy, balanced life. You've got to make time for relationships. Obviously, you've got to entertain yourself. And then, if you have kids on top of that, there are physically not enough hours in the week. So that's key message number 1 from the video, that if you are finding it hard to do all the things, don't worry about it. There are physically not enough hours in the week. The other thing is that, there's not much we can do about the fact that there are only 168 hours in the week. There's this whole shtick that you sometimes hear on the internet of like, we all have the same 24 times 7 equals 168 hours. Beyonce has the same 168 hours as you do. Elon Musk has the same 168 hours as I do. But what is obviously true is that Beyonce and Elon Musk and people, everyone is different in terms of how those 168 hours are allocated between the things that they have to do and the things that they want to do. If you're a single parent with 2 kids working 2 jobs, your allocation of 168 hours is going to look very different. So if we are trying to sincerely answer the question of how do you make time for everything, I think we've got to start here. We've got to start with these 168 hours. We've got to figure out firstly where they are going And then we've got to figure out, okay, cool, what tweaks can we make? What are the things we would like to be more efficient in? What are the things we'd like to sacrifice in order to make time for the stuff that we actually want to do? Now, for me, I had this realization back in 2012 when I got into my first year of medical school at Cambridge University. That was when I realized that there physically were not enough hours in the day to do all the things that I wanted to do. Because I wanted to do well in my studies, I wanted to sleep 8 hours a night because like brain development and like learning happens when you're sleeping. I wanted to socialize and spend time with friends and stuff because I was at university. I wanted to do some sports because I was at university and there were all these different like clubs and societies. At the time, I was spending maybe 15 hours a week watching random TV shows like Grey's Anatomy and The Vampire Diaries and like, what was it? Like, I don't remember, like 2012 back in the day. I also wanted to try and get into a relationship because I was like, oh, I'm surrounded by all of these like, you know, smart, attractive girls and stuff. And alongside that, I wanted to try and start a business to make some money on the side so that A, I could pay off my student loans quicker and have to worry a little bit less about the bills. I wanted to do all those things. And I realized very quickly that there just physically weren't enough hours in the day. And that was around the time where I started getting into the productivity literature. I started researching all the things on how to be more productive, how to be more efficient. I came across effective study techniques for me to realize that, okay, I can squeeze more efficiency out of my study times. I even did some research into, do you really need to sleep 8 hours a night? Like, what if I dropped it down to 7? Because that just frees up an extra like 7 hours in the week, you know, that kind of stuff. And the realization that I came to is there are basically 3 broad things that we need to do if we want to make time to do all the stuff. Just 3 things. Thing number 1 is that you need to squeeze a bunch of extra efficiency out of all of the things you have to do. And I will show you exactly how I did that in just a moment. Thing number 2 is that you have to strategically sacrifice a bunch of different things so that you can make time for other stuff. And again, I will show you what I strategically sacrificed. And thing number 3 is that it is possible to double dip on some of these 168 hours. And so to try and make this as like broadly accessible as possible, I'm gonna rewind back to about 2018 when I first started working full-time as a doctor. And so I had a full-time job at the time, and I want to show you what I did to my 168 hours to make time to grow my YouTube channel and the business on the side. So one thing that I did not want to sacrifice was sleep. So I was still sleeping around 8 hours per night, but I tried to sort of make my wind down time a little bit more efficient. And so through researching sleep hygiene and stuff, I realized, you know, I think on average it takes someone about 14 minutes to fall asleep, and I sort of roughly hit around that. So, you know, I was winding down 15 minutes before sleeping. I was working on average of like 8 hours a day. This would change massively depending on the week if I was on call versus if I wasn't on call, but let's just say the average was 8 hours per day, excluding lunch, 5 days a week. Lunch break was around 30 minutes. The commute actually for one of those years was 60 minutes each way. I spent about 10 minutes getting ready for work and about 5 minutes getting changed after work. And so after sleep and work, we are left with 56.5 hours a week for everything else. In terms of food, I would normally skip breakfast, which means I was 0 minutes on eating breakfast and 0 minutes preparing, cooking, and ordering it. On non-work days, i.e. weekends, I would spend maybe 15 minutes eating lunch. And I decided that because I was trying to build my YouTube channel and my business on the side, I actively decided I wasn't going to cook. And so for the most part, I either got like a ready meal or a microwave meal or like a sandwich from the cafeteria at work, or I would just order a takeaway on weekends. And so it would take maybe 3 minutes of time to like, you know, prepare, cook, and order lunch because I actively decided that I wasn't going to cook. I'd spend another maybe 15 minutes eating dinner because I had the same kind of philosophy for dinner, except when I was like going out for dinner with friends. But on a normal day, about 15 minutes eating dinner, and again, about 3 minutes preparing, cooking, and ordering it because again, I decided I wasn't going to cook and instead was just going to order takeout or just eat at the hospital cafeteria or whatever. And this means I was only spending 2.7 hours per week on cooking and eating food. This is actually drastically different to most people. Most people, I think, according to the data that I've seen, spend somewhere between 10 to 15 hours per week on like food related stuff. And because I chose to sacrifice healthy cooking and eating during that time of my life, I was able to unlock another 10 hours of free time to be able to work on my business on my YouTube channel. For all of this stuff, I'm not trying to tell you what to do. Is it a good thing that I sacrificed healthy eating and cooking and stuff for the sake of being just ordering, just like purely living off of takeaways for like 10 years of my life so that I could grind on my business? I mean, I'm glad I did it. I'm not saying you need to do it. Like your values, your mileage may be completely different. Like sometimes when people found out that I was living off of takeaways, they would be like, holy, I can't believe that would, you know, imagine your arteries and stuff. And I'd be like, well, I'll try and make it a healthy takeaway. But like genuinely, my arteries have probably suffered a little bit compared to if I'd spent an extra 10 hours a week trying to cook and eat healthy food. And I tried the stuff like HelloFresh and these kind of services, but I just found it was taking up too much time. And in my 20s, I decided I was going to prioritize growing my business rather than trying to do healthy eating. Now that I've grown the business, now I'm all about healthy eating and like zone 2 cardio and like all the longevity stuff. But I'm having to do that to reverse some of the damage that I caused to myself when I was in my 20s, when I was sacrificing healthy eating for the sake of growing the business. Should you also sacrifice that? I don't know. It's up to you. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm just trying to show what worked for me at the time so that if you're at this point in the video, you can decide what kind of sacrifices you would like to make. In terms of chores, because I was living off takeaways, I basically never did the groceries. If you'd asked me what's the price of a pint of milk, I would not have known because I almost never set foot inside a grocery store unless I was picking up a ready meal from the way to and from work for lunch or dinner. So again, lots of time saved on groceries. Is that a good thing? I'm not saying it is, but this is what my life was like. I cleaned the house maybe once a week, and I would say it took me about 10 minutes. A couple of months into my job as a doctor, I also decided that like the house was getting in too much of a state of squalor, and so we got a cleaner to come in every other week for like 2 hours. And so being able to outsource cleaning sort of cut down a lot of this time. I did laundry about once a week. Each session took maybe 15 minutes to sort of stick the stuff in the dishwasher and then like dry it up afterwards. And in terms of miscellaneous chores, I think maybe 1 hour per week just in total for like just putting stuff away and taking out the trash and like dealing with the recycling and all of the stuff. So 1.4 hours per week on chores. Again, this compares to the average household in the US. It's about 10 times lower. The average household in the US spends like 15 hours a week on chores. I was spending, as a single dude in my 20s, working a full-time job with no kids, about 1.5 hours a week on chores, which was freeing up a lot of time for everything else. Childcare was irrelevant because I did not have kids at the time. I'm about to have a kid, and so this is gonna start to become relevant in my life now, so it'd be interesting to see how my 168 hours evolves. In terms of fitness, I would go to the gym about twice a week, and conveniently the gym was on my way to work. So sometimes on the way to work, sometimes on the way back from work, I would hit the gym, but I would spend basically no time on anything else fitness related. In terms of TV shows, I made a rule for myself back in 2012 when I started university, which is that I'm not allowed to watch TV or movies or anything like that unless I'm doing it with friends. I realized I was spending, before then, I was spending like 15 hours a week watching random TV shows on my laptop on my own. And I just didn't need that in my life. When I got to university, I realized that there weren't enough hours. And so TV was a massive area where I made a strategic sacrifice to basically never watch TV shows, with the exception of like Game of Thrones once a year with friends. It became like a social thing. So while I was working full time, I basically spent 0 time watching TV shows and movies. Very occasionally, my housemate would like rope me in to watch a TV show and I'd sort of get sucked in, but like for the most part, I was spending basically 0 time watching TV. At the time, I was spending maybe 1 hour a day on social media apps, like browsing Instagram on the toilet here and there, watching like random YouTube videos and stuff. So let's say 7 hours a week on social media apps. I was spending maybe 3 or 4 hours kind of reading before bed. But actually at the time, I did most of my reading through audiobooks, which I'm going to come back to in just a moment. I did not really play any video games at the time, and I was spending basically 0 hours trying to entertain myself. So in total at the time, I was spending 10 hours a week on entertainment. This is very different to how the average American spends time on entertainment, with the whole 19 hours a week on TV shows and like somewhere between 10 and 30 hours a week on social media and stuff. So again, this was a sacrifice that I'd made to be able to free up time to be able to work on my business and my YouTube channel. In terms of relationships, at the time I was single, but I would go back to my mum's place to visit the family maybe like every other week or like a couple of times a month. So I would say maybe it was like on average 4 hours per week on family time. And in terms of socializing, maybe I would like have a dinner with friends maybe like once a week. So we're gonna say 3 hours a week on other socializing time. So because of this usage of my time, back when I was working full-time as a doctor, I was able to have 31.4 hours per week, roughly, of free time. And most of that free time was going into growing my YouTube channel and growing my business. I was also not very efficient with how I used that free time. So like overall, if I think back to how many hours I actually spent on my YouTube channel, it was around 10 hours a week for the most part. Some weeks it was more, some weeks it was less, depending on what I had going on at work. And at the time I was still running this other business of mine that was doing like helping kids get into med school. So that was taking up a good chunk of this free time as well. But you can see, compared to the average American who's got like negative 20 hours of free time, I actually had 31.4 hours of free time just purely because I was like actively choosing to sacrifice a bunch of these other things. And so when people ask me like, oh my God, how did you make time for like all the things when you were like working as a doctor and you grew your YouTube channel and your business? It's like, you know, if you sacrifice healthy eating, you don't do any chores, you don't have kids, you don't spend that much time on fitness, you never watch TV, and you really try and cut down the amount of time you're spending on social media, you're single, you end up just naturally with quite a lot of free time to be able to hustle on the side hustle or on the YouTube channel or on the business or on the hobbies or whatever else the thing is that you might want to do. But you can see, if we look at this entertainment category, like let's say I was doing what the average American does and spending 19 hours a week watching TV shows. Suddenly that free time drops down to only 12 hours a week rather than 31 hours per week, which is a massive, massive difference. Let's say I was spending 3 hours a day on social media apps, which is again sort of pretty average. And now all of a sudden, all of the free time is gone. So there is actually quite a lot of free time that most people, or at least the average American, according to the American Time Use Survey, can just magically free up by just not watching TV and not going on social media apps. That is honestly one of the major hacks. Do I think you should sacrifice time on healthy eating? Probably not. It's probably not the advice that I would give. Do I have any regrets about it? Yeah, probably. I think I haven't done like a calcification study on my arteries, but if I do, I'll probably find that they have become a little bit calcified thanks to all of the shitty food that I was eating back in the day. So food is an area where I sort of wish I'd eaten a bit healthier. But do I regret the fact that I basically spent zero time watching TV and was not up to date on the TV shows? Absolutely not. Do I regret the fact that I only spent 1 hour a day on social media rather than 3 or 5 or 8 or 16 like some people do? Absolutely not. And so I'm so glad that I literally had 31 hours a week of free time in addition to having a full-time job. And I was able to use that time to build my dream, which was able to help me eventually quit my job and stuff. The other thing that made this number go up even more was double dipping time. To me, the commute to work and my lunch break at work were prime time for me to double dip and do something else with that time. So every day on the commute to work, I would be listening to audiobooks or podcasts, usually at 2 to 3x speed. If I felt chill, I would listen to fantasy fiction. So I was listening to the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan and the Stormlight Archive series by Brandon Sanderson around that time. But for the most part, what I was listening to was like business podcasts, business books, and podcasts about how to grow a YouTube channel. So I managed to get most days like a solid 2 hours worth of like listening time, usually at double speed. So really 4 hours of content was just being injected into my veins through like the Bluetoothy speaker thing in my car while I was driving to and from work. During my lunch breaks, as a doctor, you kind of take lunch at weird times depending on what's going on. If it was coinciding with when all of my mates were also taking a lunch break, I would just hang out and socialize. But if I was having lunch at a weird time because I had to deal with some patients in the morning or whatever, and I was the only one in the cafeteria, I would be like, great, I've got half an hour. Let me just inhale lunch. Let me get out my iPad and let me plan out my next YouTube video. So that was another way that I was squeezing more efficiency out of those extra minutes during my lunch break at work in order to be prepared for filming the extra YouTube videos like on the weekend. Again, am I saying that this is what you should do? Absolutely not. This is not a video. Other than suggesting you download the spreadsheet and put these numbers in for yourself and maybe do the ideal week thing, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just like, I've gotten the question so often of like, oh my God, how did you have the time while you had a job? ... And I thought, you know what, let's just make the spreadsheet and let me show you all of the things that I was doing so that when you see that I had 31 hours, like basically an extra full-time job worth of time to be able to spend on growing a YouTube channel and growing a business. If you have 30 hours a week to spend on a thing, it's not that hard to get the thing to start making money and to start growing, right? But if you have 0 hours of free time a week, that makes a huge difference. If you only have 4 hours a week of time to spend on something rather than 34 hours a week, that makes a massive difference to what you're actually able to do with your time. So when people are like, oh my God, Abdaal's so productive and all this stuff, it's like, honestly, this is not that productive. This is just choosing to sacrifice certain things, which means you end up having way more free time than someone else who's made different choices or has had different obligations. For example, in that situation, let's say I was doing all of these things, but let's say I also had kids and I was spending maybe, 3 hours of quality time with the kids on the weekdays and the weekends. Maybe I was having to ferry the kids to and from like social activities and stuff. Maybe that was taking 2 hours. Maybe I was having to do some like doctor's appointments and school shenanigans and that was taking another 2 hours. All of a sudden, my 31 hours a week drops down to 6 hours a week because now 25 hours a week is devoted to childcare. And I think this is something that a lot of these like productivity type videos often don't talk about. They're often, for the most part, productivity videos are created by people who don't have kids. And now that I'm literally about to have a child and I've been reading the books about it and stuff, I am realizing just how much effort goes into childcare. And now that I'm like looking at friends of mine who are parents, I'm like, holy shit, that's a lot of time that goes into childcare. If you have kids, it's so hard to make time for everything because you're spending 25 hours a week on like kid-related stuff, if not more, depending on what your circumstances are. If you have kids and you spend 10 hours a week watching TV, boom, suddenly you're overdrawn and like there's just physically no hours left in the day. So this is a video about how to make time for everything. How do you make time for everything? Well, you basically recognize that you have 168 hours to play with every week. And you look at where you are currently spending that time by either doing like an official time audit and like tracking all your time or just like roughly guesstimating like how much time you're spending on all these different things. But in many ways, being able to do stuff is really just about what do you want to sacrifice? It just comes down to sacrifices, right? There are physically not enough hours in the day to do everything. There are physically not enough hours a day to have, just having a healthy, balanced life takes up 168 hours of the week. Just that. So if you want to do something on top of that, if you want to like start a business while you have a full-time job, if you want to start a side hustle while you have a full-time job, if you want to get really good at art while you have a full-time job, holy moly, like good luck, because something's got to give. Something has to be sacrificed in order for you to make time for the things you really want to do. And so if there's really just one message I would like to leave you with, it is that don't feel bad if you are struggling to make time for everything, because as we've seen, there are just physically not enough hours in the week available to do all the things you want to do. And so once you realize that, you can just decide what are the things you would like to sacrifice. Would you like to sacrifice healthy eating? I wouldn't recommend it. Would you like to sacrifice entertainment? You could probably do that. Would you like to stop watching TV? You could probably do that. Would you like to stop scrolling on social media? You could probably do that. Would you like to spend less time with your kids or your spouse? Probably not. That's probably a poor place to sacrifice. Would you like to spend less time sleeping? Probably not. That's probably a bad place to sacrifice. Do you want to like go part-time at work? Well, if you can afford to go part-time at work, that massively frees up a load of time. Do you want to quit your job to do the thing? Well, again, if you have enough savings and the money problem is taken care of course, you can totally quit your job and massively free up like 60 hours a week of extra time. It's just a case of where do you want to make the sacrifices? Equally, you might decide you don't want to make any sacrifices. I have friends who are spending 24 hours a week watching TV and 24 hours a week on social media, and they don't want to do anything else. They're like, well, what else is there to do? They have no aspirations to start their own business. They don't want to do their own thing. They don't want to be financially free. They don't really care about having autonomy over their time. They just want to go to a job, a 9 to 5, that like pays well enough, that's not painful to go to, and then they just want to come home and watch TV and play video games and stuff. And again, fantastic. That's totally fine. If that is what you want, you can choose exactly how you'd like to spend your 168 hours. But if you're the sort of person who watches this channel and you'd like to make time for more things than just that, then it's worth downloading the spreadsheet and seeing where your time is going and where you would like it to go. And at the point where you have freed up some amount of time to be able to work towards a goal, you might want to check out this video over here, which is my evidence-based actionable strategies for how to be more effective and efficient en route to achieving specific goals, whatever that goal is. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you got value from this video, and I will hopefully see you in the next one. Bye-bye.